What can Ukraine do to win the war against Russia? It's a very interesting and complex question that we are going to be exploring today, but first and foremost, is there even a chance for victory in the situation as it stands now? A conventional military victory? Maybe not. Probably not, actually, to be brutally honest. The chances are next to zero. But Ukraine does not need to win the war in the traditional sense of repelling and invading their aggressors, forcing them to sign a peace treaty. All Ukraine needs to achieve for de facto victory is to ensure that Russia does not win. Still, easier said than done, but there is a golden opportunity for Ukraine to do just that. But before we truly begin theory crafting, let's see what we think we know, so that we can formulate a strategy and see whether or not my idea is feasible at all. Bearing in mind, of course, this is all conjecture, based on a lot of best guesses and various official statements and social media reports. Everything should be taken with a grain or two of salt. Starting in the south. We've got a rather fluid situation here. The Russian advance out of Crimea was a major success, especially when compared to the other axes of the invasion, and gained a lot of ground very rapidly. Indeed, the majority of the gains were made during the very first day of the invasion, before running into what appears to be a somewhat hurried Ukrainian response. It is conceivable Ukraine did not anticipate a major offensive coming up through Crimea, considering the immediate geographical difficulties such a route would present. This does not appear to have deterred the Russians, however, as they have significant troops in the area. The 7th Air Assault Division, the 42nd Guards Motorized Rifle Division, and possibly the 810th Naval Infantry Brigade, probably reorganized into battalion tactical groups. In addition to this comes, of course, also a ton of independent support formations, as well as AA, AAA, artillery, etc. Opposing them, we have the Ukrainian 58th Motorized Brigade, the 28th Mechanized Brigade, and possibly the 17th Tank Brigade, or at the very least elements of it. We also have Ukrainian National Guard troops, the former territorial troops, but we will be concentrating primarily on the military organizations here, because even if there are significant National Guard troops available, they would not be the kind of mobile troops we'd need for any kind of organized operations against Russia, and make no mistake, Ukraine will not win a purely defensive war. Anywho, turning to the immediate point and scenario, this area to the south here is very much so Ukraine's vulnerable underbelly, and may require reinforcing if the Russian drive to the east continues. Speaking of, heading eastwards, we have the Donetsk and Luhansk fronts. The Russian troops from Crimea have managed to link up with the separatist-controlled area, and therefore with Russia, encircling the port city of Mariupol in the process. This is pretty much Russia's one and only major strategic success so far, and may very well endanger the bulk of the Ukrainian army. As located along this frontier with the separatists and Russia, we have the 56th Motorized Brigade, the 54th Mechanized Brigade, the 53rd Mechanized Brigade, and two further mechanized brigades to the north holding off another Russian offensive, the 92nd and the 93rd, joined by the 58th Motorized Brigade. These are opposed by no less than 4 Russian armies and 2 corps. But do take into consideration that only elements of these armies are likely to be deployed as far as we know, and furthermore, that a Russian army is smaller than its Western equivalent, more like a corps-sized formation. Still, The Ukrainians are likely to be quite badly outnumbered, up against anything from 4 to 8, maybe even 16 divisions worth of Russian troops and separatist allies as well, and possibly even more than that. Yet, even so, the separatist border has barely moved. This in despite of reports of heavy and repeated clashes. Undoubtedly, the Ukrainians have established considerable defenses near the separatist areas. That was always a very obvious route for the Russians to take, with a great deal of dug-in armor and infantry fighting vehicles, along with bunkers and pre-prepared fallback positions, which are probably explaining the slow rate of the Russian advance. To the north, the Ukrainians have appeared to fallen back in good order in some areas, and others they have settled down for the long haul, as the front has also remained mostly static, with heavy fighting raging around large towns and population centers like Kharkiv and Okhtyrka. This part of the front line appears fairly stable and secure, at least for the time being, as Russian forces are making very little headway in the face of the bulk of the Ukrainian army. But this is also by far the most dangerous area for Ukraine. One false step here could end the war in a day or less. If the units moving in from Crimea or the troops in the north manage a breakthrough, there is a very real danger that the best part of 3 Ukrainian brigades plus National Guard troops will be cut off from the rest of Ukraine and forced into a desperate defensive pocket, or attempting a costly breakout to the west. If the Russians then manage to hold and reduce that pocket, Ukraine is as good as doomed. Lastly then, we have the Great Kiev Clusterfuck. God alone knows what units are involved there, as I am pretty sure neither the Ukrainians or the Russians have a complete picture anymore. Kiev has seen fierce and near constant fighting since day 1 of the invasion, and both sides are reporting taking, losing, and then retaking positions again and again. If historical precedence is any guide, the fighting near Kiev is probably mauling battalions and regiments at a frightening pace. But, nevertheless, we shall try to establish an idea of what's around. On the Russian side, we have the 1st Guards Tank Army, probably primarily engaged towards the south, and the 2nd Guards Combined Arms Army, that has finally, more or less, completed its drive towards the outskirts of Kiev, where the Russian army had undoubtedly intended for an encirclement action to have been long since finished against Kiev, but the Ukrainians wanted it differently. Then, pushing down from the north, we have the 41st and the 36th Combined Arms Armies, and on the west side of the Dnieper River, the 35th Combined Arms Army. We've also had elements of at least 2 divisions of VDV air mobile troops, but I haven't been able to find any definitive sign they are still there, so we will stick with the larger formations for now. Bearing in mind, again, these will not be the full strengths of these combined armies, rather they will be bringing in elements, a division here, a brigade here, so on and so on, maybe mixing and matching regimental combat groups or brigade-level tactical groups as needed, with artillery, anti-aircraft, etc., etc. And returning to the 2nd Guards Combined Arms Army, we have the almost second Russian strategic success, as they have managed to at least partially cut off several small centers of Ukrainian resistance to the north. It seems as if they might still have some sort of communication and supplies coming in from Kiev, but the situation is so chaotic that it's very difficult to know if the Russians have actually completed the surround of these units, or whether or not they still have some sort of lines of communication and supply with Kiev. And even if they do, it is likely to be well within the range of Russian artillery, making any large-scale moves hazardous at best. Now, we aren't entirely sure what kind of Ukrainian units are trapped, at least partially, to the north, but judging by the strength of the engagement going on near Chernihiv and Konotop, it would be likely to assume battalion-sized formations, National Guard troops, most definitively, and potentially elements of the 1st Tank Brigade, as we have fairly decent indications that they are still operative in Chernihiv. Then, on the defenders' side, we are pretty sure that the majority of the 1st Tank Brigade is in and or around Kiev, with some elements possibly cut off to the north. We also have the 72nd and the 30th Mechanized Brigades, and rather noteworthy, the 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade, without whose presence Kiev would probably have already been on Russian hands, as they were the ones who stopped the VDV air mobile elements from seizing control of the international airports. However, they are technically part of the National Guard, and we are going to keep this mostly to regular military formations. And on that note, this has also by no means been an exhaustive breakdown of all the formations deployed, as I am merely setting the stage here, so to say. For now, finally we get to the fun part, trying to figure out how to get Ukraine out of this rather messy mess. So, now that we've got a reasonable idea of what forces are deployed at the front and what they're facing, what have we got left to play with? We have the 14th and the 24th Mechanized. They are both near the border to Poland, and since Poland is relatively unlikely to invade Ukraine, they can be freed up fairly safely. As could potentially the 59th Motorized, but considering the dodgy situation to the south and direct east, we might as well just dedicate them as strategic reserves for those areas right away. Then we also got the 10th and the 128th Mountain Brigades. These are also probably best kept in reserve and or allocated to Kiev, as they are mechanized and comparable to the other mechanized brigades, but city fighting is not their area of expertise, neither is engaging the Russians on the far more open areas to the east either. Then finally, we have the cream of the crop, the Air Assault Brigades. And one very specialized formation as well that might prove very, very useful. Now, firstly, don't let the name fool you. The Air Assault Brigades are by no extent of the imagination light formations, nor are they really all that air mobile either. The air part comes from them having been formed from old VDV units after the fall of the Soviet Union, the VDV, by the way, being essentially the Soviet paratroopers. Today, only one of the air assault brigades is fully air mobile, that is the 25th. The rest are the elite heavy assault troops of Ukraine, equipped with the lion's share of the new and fancy-ass equipment and weaponry, BTR-4s and even a few upgraded Humvees and plenty of tanks, with each brigade coming as standard with 5 tank companies, one of which is supposed to be the new and upgraded T-80s. Additionally, unlike much of the Ukrainian army, the air assault brigades are also primarily made up of professional soldiers rather than conscripts. Ukraine has 4 brigades and 3 regiments of these troops, and we are pretty sure 2 regiments and 1 brigade of them are currently in combat. 1 near Kiev and 2 on the eastern front, so at best we probably have 3 brigades and a regiment. Lastly, we have the very interesting 61st Jaeger Brigade. It was first formed as a territorial motorized formation, a National Guard essentially, in 2015, and then reorganized into a reserve motorized brigade in 2017. But the interesting part happened as late as 2019, when it was made into its current configuration, a light infantry brigade specialized for operations in the foresty and swampy areas north of Kiev, near the little-known town of Pripyat. Well, there we have it. What can we do then with 2 mechanized brigades, 3 air assault brigades plus 1 regiment, and a brigade of sockers? Immediately, boring though it may be, one of the mechanized brigades and at least one of the air assault brigades will have to be placed in reserve. Several of the brigades currently fighting are almost certainly beginning to feel the strain by now and might need to be reinforced or outright rotated to be reorganized. Additionally, the 3 brigades on the Luhansk-Donbass area border that are in danger of getting surrounded must be protected. Otherwise, again, it's game over. Simultaneously, though, Ukraine is not winning a war of attrition against Russia. Putin has more men, more tanks, more vehicles, and a lot more artillery shells. Worse yet, Ukraine may be getting plenty of handheld AT weapons shipped over the Polish border to them, but before the conflict started, they had small arms munitions for 20 days, maybe a month or so of extended fighting. More will undoubtedly be produced or bought, but the Ukrainian army's window to have a real effect is closing fast. And luckily, the best opportunity for a telling counterstrike is still wide open. Let's change maps here for a minute and check out the northern area of Kiev. The Russian front line runs circa something like this. You can see how the Russians have been trying to surround Kiev from the west side after their air mobile elements failed to do so on day 1 and 2. But more importantly, can you see a very telling strategic problem right here? There are only 2 major roads leading in towards Kiev from the Belarusian border, and they both combine into one single road near Ivankiv. This is forcing the entirety of the 35th Combined Arms Army's elements in Ukraine and its logistics, additional battalions, etc., all to filter down a single major roadway. You don't need to be much of a strategic genius to see the vulnerability in this situation. And it is exactly here that Ukraine's main efforts should be directed. 2 air assault brigades and the specialized 61st Jaeger Brigade, which are of course trained specifically to operate in this exact area. These would be the ideal troops to be deployed. Now, it might be tempting to just grab anything and everything we theoretically have and throw it at the Russian logistics, but, well, 3 brigades is probably already pushing the number of troops that can operate effectively in such a relatively small geographical area. Furthermore, this is most absolutely so a job for the elites. These 3 brigades will have to move through very rough terrain, a lot of woods, soggy ground, and outright marshy swamps. Not to forget, of course, also the small matter of a few thousand angry Russians. We don't know the precise strength of the 35th Combined Arms Army elements in Ukraine, but before the war they had at least 3 brigades plus artillery and support elements in Belarusia. Add on possible VDV troops, attached brigades, and the very real risk of Belarusian soldiers accidentally wandering into the area of operations. And the Ukrainians have a hard slog ahead of them. One they also need to be making on the double. The crucial crossroads at Ivankiv needs to be seized before any sort of disengagement action can be taken from the front near Kiev. Fortunately, as the fighting near Kiev is hot and hectic, any organized withdrawal will take a lot of organizational skill and time. And if our Ukrainian friends are particularly blessed with a successful offensive, they may even have the opportunity to drive towards Chernobyl and Alexandrovka, cutting the Western Russian advance off completely and likely isolating several large groups of opposition forces, now trapped between the sizable Ukrainian presence in Kiev, including the heavily armed and armored 4th Rapid Reaction Brigade and the 1st Armored Brigade, with air assault elites to their rear. Reducing the pocket will by no means be an easy feat, but with flagging Russian morale and the further blow to it by having their supplies cut off might conceivably lead to a fairly rapid victory. Now obviously, this doesn't mean traditional military victory, as the Russians still have the overwhelming majority of their troops still left, but it would give Ukraine a powerful position at the negotiation table. A major Russian offensive axis, cut off, defeated, and sent cowering back over the Belarusian border, with possibly thousands of Russian POWs that can be used for propaganda purposes and as negotiation chips at ceasefire talks. Considering the pressure already being placed on Putin both internationally and domestically at this point in time, a parade of 1,000 Russian POWs might just be what Ukraine needs to finally tip the scales in their direction completely and utterly in terms of public opinion and possibly even in terms of other nations. NATO right now is moving a lot of troops up to their shared border with Belarus and Ukraine and other areas, ostensibly to make sure that Russia doesn't go too far. Now, I don't believe for even a single second that NATO genuinely believes that Russia might invade the Baltic countries or Finland or Sweden or anything like this, much less so Poland, not after the debacle in Ukraine. Nevertheless, they have to take their precautions. There is also the fact that after the frankly embarrassing performance of the Russian Air Force, a no-fly zone, which seems completely unrealistic now, might suddenly not seem quite so unrealistic after a sizable Ukrainian victory. There might even be a potential possibility for peacekeeping troops to be sent in from the Western nations, creating a de facto unbreachable buffer between the Ukrainians and the Russians. Bearing in mind these possibilities are still very, very distant, but with all of the political and populist public pressure being placed on the other nations of the world to do something, anything, even resulting in historic arms exports from, for example, Germany, which would have been unthinkable mere months ago, one cannot completely exclude the possibility that a large enough Ukrainian success mightn't tip the odds enough in the Ukrainians' favor for a few Western powers to pick the winning horse, shall we say. But more immediately, realistically, and pragmatically, a major Russian offensive defeated, with now several Ukrainian brigades ready and able to be moved to other areas of the front, will guarantee a long conflict for Russia. And with the weight of the sanctions and the public unrest and the humiliation, frankly, currently ongoing, I am not so sure Putin is going to be willing to extend this for potentially months and months and months. Furthermore, it's not like Putin can simply just double down and increase the number of forces available immediately either. The logistics required to support just the troops currently there have taken weeks and possibly months to build up. Any substantial increase in these troop numbers is going to take even longer. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Putin decided one final Hail Mary, like a massive renewed offensive against the potential pocket that we talked about near Luhansk and Donetsk. But if this too fails, and considering the Ukrainian army's current stand-fast resistance, I have no reason to assume it wouldn't fail, then peace negotiations are probably the only option. Now, the Russians are already trying to initiate referendums where parts of Ukraine will be asked to vote to secede and gain their independence, and Russia may very well try to create further breakaway little republics so that Russia can retreat while still maintaining their facade that, oh no, we totally just invaded Ukraine to save the people from the Nazis and the evil Westerners and stuff. It won't be much of an excuse, but in the game of grand politics, it might be enough of an excuse for Putin to reconsider the war. Now, this is not a slam dunk by any extent of the imagination. In fact, I would say that even if the Ukrainians managed a amazing assault and cutting off huge numbers of Russian troops north of Kiev, the odds of this leading to proper, actually lasting peace negotiations, absolute best, 50-50. If I'm being realistic, 20-30% tops. Because the simple fact is, despite the war going a lot slower than Russia would ever have anticipated, Putin is still winning. It's going to take a long time. It's going to be far more expensive than he had initially thought. It's going to cause a lot more damage to him, his public persona, and his relations than he would have hoped to, but he is still winning. And unless Putin can find a scenario which allows him to withdraw while saving sufficient face, and or he is forced to do so by internal pressure, he is very unlikely to call it quits. Finally, I want to wrap up by again asking, what do you think about this style of content then, my dear subscribers and viewers? I know you liked the previous Ukraine videos quite a lot, but this is a bit more of a larger departure into theory crafting, so please do let me know what you think, and of course, as always, do remember to hit that like button, as it is very good for my channel if you do, particularly also if you're going to leave a comment. And finally, the usual disclaimers. All of this is pure, cold, hard speculation and nothing more. I, unfortunately, for some mysterious reason, have not been granted access to either the Russian or the Ukrainian headquarters. I know it's a baffling decision, but there you go, and so I have to make do with best guesses and the many reports on social media. And I also want to give a thank you to Artemis Fowl here for sending me a bunch of the various posts he finds too. It has been tremendously helpful in trying to figure out where everything is and documenting the current situation. I am also not a military professional. I am simply someone with a great deal of passion for military history, both modern and ancient, and therefore believe I have a halfway educated understanding of what's currently going on. Finally, as always, until next time, I've been Arch. Thank you all very much for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon. Have a good day.